national ban on abortion, IVF, and even some forms of contraception coming to the US? This week, we're going to look at our issue voter bill for March, the Life at Conception Act. This bill has been introduced 13 times since 2011 and never made it out of committee. Stephen, it's really nice to see you. Would you mind explaining a little bit more about this bill?
Sure. And hello, Sarah. It's great to be back. The Life at Conception Act does exactly what it says it does. It extends legal protection for all human beings back to the moment of fertilization. So that could include, obviously, normal sort of sexual reproduction. It could also include cloning or any other instance where fertilization actually happens.
The bill does this by invoking the authority of Congress under the US Constitution that is for the guaranteed right of life, saying that that guaranteed right of life is now applicable in this instance, correct?
Yes, that's absolutely right. They want to make it so that the 14th Amendment, the right to life, applies to all human beings, irrespective of development stage. So it's intended to say that preborn human beings are human beings, exactly the same as the rest of us, and that the beginning of legal personhood begins with the biological beginning of life. So that effectively a blastocyte, which is a small collection of cells, about 5 or 6 cells, that is the first stage of development after fertilization, that has exactly the same right to life as a fully grown adult human being.
That's quite a definition. And I know in the past, when we've had bills like this kind of taking the national stage, there's been a lot of concerns about when defining the right to life so early before a child is in the world, what kind of implications that can have for a mother who has any kind of health issues where her child ends up dying, or there's, just issues in the pregnancy that are pretty concerning. And, we're seeing this a lot in states that have the 6-week abortion ban, of after the 6 weeks are over and there's still issues and maybe the child will not survive once it comes into the world. Maybe the child is already effectively dead. They're not, moving forward with terminating the pregnancy because of these regulations. How does this act kind of handle this huge issue?
Well, the simple answer is that it doesn't. It's a really, really short bill, just a couple of paragraphs really that defines this as a principle. And the drafters of this legislation do say that it's more of a statement in principle, a statement of principle, rather than providing a lot of details around the implications. It does talk about not allowing the prosecution of women for the death of an unborn child. So it seeks to not criminalize miscarriages, for example, but it doesn't go anything beyond that at all, which does beg the question. So what? What
Mhm.
happens if this bill becomes law? What effect would it actually have on the lives of Americans?
With this definition of life beginning essentially at fertilization, we see that this will have repercussions like the Alabama IVF bill of, these embryos are being considered living legal persons. Are there any other types of implications that this bill could have on other types of fertility treatments?
Yes, it does have far-reaching implications for forms of contraception like Plan B, which aim to stop the fertilized ovum actually being implanted in the uterus. But it has wider reaching implications than that. So the IVF is really interesting. So this bill was basically languishing in committee. It wasn't really going anywhere, as none of the previous bills really had. But it got renewed interest following the Alabama Supreme Court ruling last month that you mentioned, which basically said that frozen embryos are people, and that therefore IVF clinics could be committing murder if they, say, throw away old fertilized ovum and so on. Lawmakers in Alabama did move swiftly to protect IVF, but it really did make people focus on this bill more because a lot of the Republicans who came out in defense of IVF following the Alabama ruling are the same Republicans who have signed up to this bill. And obviously, this bill doesn't protect IVF.
Those are some pretty huge implications for treatments that we don't necessarily define directly with abortion. And I also saw that there was a bill that was proposed a couple years ago, and Rand Paul added a particular section to it that I think, made the bill a little bit better when it's coming to what this could actually look like in practice. And he put in that bill that nothing in this act shall be construed to require the prosecution of any woman for the death of her unborn child, a prohibition on in vitro fertilization, or a prohibition on the use of birth control, another means of preventing fertilization. When looking at this bill and its popularity, where do we stand with this?
The Rand Paul bill was obviously an improvement over the draft of of the bill that's currently in Congress, but it was still very broad and very vague. And it's a real problem for this bill. If you're pro-choice, of course you're going to hate it. But even if you're pro-life, this is also problematic because of its brevity and lack of detail, or in fact, a complete ban on abortion in all circumstances, which is what this bill would do. But eventually, if the bill becomes law, it would be up to the courts and the states to decide how to implement it. It could go in any direction. Different states would interpret it in different ways. The Supreme Court would have to wade in. Which way would they go? You don't know. And it's a real issue when you're asking lawmakers to support a bill and effectively the people to support lawmakers who are supporting the bill when you really don't know what the impact of that bill would be in the real world.
I think that there's so much abortion legislation that we're talking about that's getting passed, that's getting proposed every single week. And, you know, with this national conversation, the presidential election coming up, Trump really talking quite a bit about trying to figure out what type of national ban, you know, is it 14 weeks? Is it 16 weeks? You know, there's just so much around these that, you know, it's these kind of blanket bans that are really not taking a lot into consideration still.
At least if they're talking about the number of weeks, at least they're talking about the detail. So you know what it is that's proposed and you can decide whether you agree or not. It's almost impossible with this bill.
Yeah. That's wow. Yeah. Well, you know, another very interesting issue voter bill. Thank you so much for your time today.
Excellent. Thank you very much.